I literally stopped sharing my screen and having a deck at some point because think about this. Put yourself in the mind of the investor. They're rolling meeting into meeting into meeting into meeting. If you don't bring energy and a story behind what you're doing, they're zoning out. What do you do in a meeting? They're humans. They're doing the same thing. Okay. So you really need to capture their attention so that they're listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PlayBridge podcast. Today, we're joined by Alexandra Mysoor. She's the co-founder of Alix, a fintech company simplifying the estate settlement process. She has raised $5.5 million in VC funding from investors including Initialized Capital and Magnify Ventures. Alexandra has over 20 years of business experience building and scaling multiple successful consumer brands and contributing to Mysoor Industries' multinational growth. So excited to finally connect with you and can't wait to learn more about your story today. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ruffin. I'm excited to be here.
I'd love to start off by learning a bit more about your background. It sounds like you've been involved in leading and building multiple different businesses. So before we jump into Alix, can you maybe just start by sharing what was the first business you started and, how did you get it off the ground?
Yeah, so I'm a complete accidental entrepreneur. I think, for anyone out there who might not have the traditional background that you see in venture-backed tech founders, I think this will be really interesting. So, I was a pre-med student at UC Berkeley, and I came to an awakening junior year and realized that is not what I want to do. And I called my Indian dad, who just did not think there would be another option. And I felt like I wanted to stick it to him and prove him wrong. And so I got an internship, and the first paying internship I found was at an agency that happened to have the Apple account. And part of the gig was that I would have to sit in Cupertino. And as luck would have it, I was in the room, a fly on the wall, by the way, amongst at least two-digit amounts of people. But Steve Jobs and a woman named Katie Cotton, who had led at the time their marketing and communication efforts. That awakening really changed my life. I really realized that there was something very interesting happening in the internet in 2000, 2001. And that sort of set me off on this path of, doing digital marketing. By the way, people believed me because I was young and no one really knew what that word meant yet. And, I worked at a few different agencies, and as luck would have it, I happened to stumble upon an interesting piece of information. So I had these two women who were on my team, who were my direct reports, which was exciting when you're that young. I go to the HR person's office, and I saw that one of them was a contractor. I didn't know that. And I saw that their take home was far greater than mine because of that, because you weren't getting paid that much to begin with. And this person was working virtually, which was very unusual back then. So I get this harebrained idea that I too would rather not work in a cubicle farm and would also like to get paid more and work from home and watch Oprah and do yoga. Okay. And so I knew that I was highly valuable. And I decided to do that. In return, changing my contract also meant that it freed me to get my own client, which I did. And I was still living a very, frugal life, having just graduated college. And so I was meeting these really cool entrepreneurs that were like, hey, I'll pay you equity instead of dollars. And I was like, okay. And, as luck would have it, some of those actually really paid off. But the second most important thing was that I realized if they could do it, I could do it. And that was like a very important thing for me because, there was this demystifying of what that meant. This was pre-social network movie or any sort of real awareness. So that really sort of was like this awakening, you can't be it till you see it. And in that case, I was like, well, I could definitely maybe do this. So that's kind of how I started down this path of this idea of what even entrepreneurship is, having, being sort of the queen of your own destiny, so to speak. And, fast forward to about, I may have the date slightly wrong, but let's say 2007-ish, pre-Shopify, this is important. I had just had my son, and BPA free baby bottles, eco-friendly was like a big thing. And I literally had to buy a case of baby bottles wholesale just to be able to find these baby bottles, as it wasn't widely available. And I was like, oh shoot, like I should sell the rest of them to the other mom friends I made. And I was like, wait, this is kind of retail. Like maybe I should open up an online store. There was no Shopify yet, everyone. So that meant I bartered PR, digital marketing skills with some of the people I met. There was this college student who was a coder. My first e-commerce platform, for those who know anything back there, was built on Joomla. It was super bad. I grew up with someone in the PayPal mafia back in Minnesota. And so he told me about payments. And I was like, okay, voila. And so that's how I got started. We ended up building at its time one of the largest e-commerce stores for eco-friendly baby products. We were the largest third-party seller in some major Amazon categories. Also very interesting because we were one of the first third-party sellers. This was very early days. And so Amazon was also interested in learning from us. And I started realizing that e-commerce was going to become very data-driven. It's not just picking the right color to sell. It was a data-driven thing. All this stuff seems so obvious now, but these were such early days. And so that became like something that I took with me, and subsequently ended up pivoting to not just being a retailer, because you weren't kind of queen of your own destiny. The next level of it was becoming vertically integrated. So over time, we bought micro brands, and I think people call them Amazon aggregators, but we were sort of the OG to all of that. And we sell our products through tons of stores and things like that. And it was just a very interesting kind of cowgirl kind of time.
What were some of the biggest lessons or differences from going from like running more of like an agency style digital marketing business to building an e-commerce business?
The dependency in a service business is really the human hours, right? So that's really different than something that you can scale. Infinitely is not the right word, but in a greater way, right? Like selling an actual hard good or a widget is really different than selling human hours. So that was one. The other thing too is that it is a service business in an agency. So a service business is like, the customer is always right. And so that's also very different as well. So the economics are different. The way that you run it is different. But I learned a tremendous amount in that business and how to deal with people. I think that my value of I sort of have this core value of being very relationship driven, because I think sometimes people think really short term and transactionally, but being older, I'm 43 now, like you really see in the arc of your life, like how things pan out. Like you don't know what that person is going to grow up to be. You don't know how this person is going to re-enter your life later on. And so I think that when you grow up in like a service type industry, you do really value relationships. And I think if you can just take that learning into anything you do, like it'll compound over the years.
And then moving to launching Alix, how did you take that jump? What was your first vision for it? And how did you decide like this is the time to really go all in on this?
So I think one of the learnings from, creating brands was that I felt like I was pretty good at solving everyday problems. And I think that is something that I can recognize. And so the story of Alix actually goes a little further back, which is when I was, so my parents are from India, but I'm born and brought up here. And when I was 7, we moved from Houston, Texas to Minnesota, of all places, which is where I ended up growing up. Yes. And there was this woman who knocked on our door on the very first day we moved there. She was our neighbor, Carol. And she came with an apple pie, true story. She had a daughter named Katie, who's my bestie. And, years later, she ended up being like a Sherpa through all things for my mom, America and snow. And we just are such good family friends. And, fast forward years later, we lost Carol, and she was the last surviving spouse. And I offered to help my friend Katie with just some tasks, literally just some tasks. I'm not an attorney, like never settled in a state. I didn't think it would be that hard. Carol lived a very simple life. She actually lived in the same home that we met her in 1987. She was a stay-at-home mom. Her husband had served our country and he was an elevator technician. So simple, hearty, good people, salt of the earth people. Carol left behind a will. So thank you, Carol. She left behind a paper map to take me on a digital scavenger hunt. It took us 900 hours and 18 months to settle the affairs. That's important because I give myself a B for average because that's how long it takes people in this country to settle the affairs of a very, I would say, simple estate. That is a full-time job no American has ever been trained for. When you ask an attorney, a CPA, your next door neighbor, what is estate settlement? This is also important. You will get different answers. Right now, estate settlement is a very broken process with a lot of point solutions and random advisors in the process. This is not something we all think about until it happens to you. And that's really key. I think a lot of people think if you have a trust or a will or something like that in place, if mom and dad have that in place, you're fine. Like there's some sort of magical button you'll press and it'll all be transferred. No, it is not true. First of all, most people in this country, regardless of demographics, believe it or not, it's not the dependency, do not have any estate planning. Number two, if there is any estate planning in place, it is oftentimes dated or it may be helpful, but it is not picking up the phone to call the bank. It is not shutting down subscription. It is not doing the heavy administrative work that is the 900 hours, right? And so I think that's important. So at Alix, we are simplifying estate settlement, not planning, everyone who's listening. Settlement. That means when someone you love passes away, who is going to help you close down the affairs of the person you love? And that's when you call Alix. I just felt like there had to be a better way. And I just could not believe someone had not come into this space to do it. And it's something that, unfortunately, many of us will have to do in our life. So that's how I kind of stumbled upon this very, one could call peculiar space.
Yeah. I've not personally had to settle estate, but I've seen my dad do it for his parents. And like what goes into those 900 hours? I mean, I'm sure, especially with like the digital age, it's so complicated, but would love to better understand like what do you really have to do to settle an estate?
Most people know the net worth of Elon Musk and Bill Gates more than their own parents.
Yeah.
That's important. Like, think about it. Everyone listening, like, think about it a second. You might have some threads. I think dad has an account in Wells Fargo. Maybe there's an investment account at Charles Schwab. Like some threads. Maybe there's some nebulous Excel spreadsheet that dad has made with passwords. Maybe. Okay. But like, they don't really know. So discovery has been like really important to families, right? And we have these automations that kind of go out and help you figure out what is in the estate. So part one is figuring out what is in the estate. Remember I joked about Carol leaving behind a will paper map that took us on this digital scavenger hunt. That is what it is. So that's number one, discovery. Number two, once you discover the things, you have to get the things, right? We can't help you transfer what we don't know exists, which is why discovery is important. The second part is how do you do the thing? So, that's where Alix comes in. You could go to Google, which, by the way, one of my girlfriends is the ER doctor, and she always says, please do not Google your symptoms. I would say this is the same case with estate settlement. Please do not Google. By the way, if you do, you will find a checklist. Good luck. It doesn't give you much information other than do this. It doesn't tell you how to do it. And that part is really difficult, right? So we, will do all the work of marshaling all the different estates, right? Or of the assets in the estate. So the bank accounts, who's going to call them? First of all, everyone seriously, like, think about the last bill you had to, like, they made a mistake. So for me, Comcast made this mistake. It's like, I don't know why they were overcharging me $38, but it was triggering me. So I called, I had to wait on hold. And I never got to someone. I was like, my time is worth more than $38. Just take it. But now imagine doing this task. You have to shut down the account. And when you get a hold of someone, you have to tell them that this person, you cannot verify your identity because this person is dead. Like that is a really difficult, windy maze you have to go down, and now do that times at least 70 different institutions. That is the type of work that lays ahead. Calling life insurance companies to claim the benefit, calling every single financial institution, making sure if there was a last paycheck that you got it, if there was like all the things that go into it. 70% of people who inherit a home sell it in this country. There's that. I think it was 1 out of 3 people who inherit money within 2 years have a negative cash balance. That's like the lottery effect. That's also important, right?
Because they're paying to like handle this
No,
process.
I think it's no, I don't think it's that. I think also once people get this windfall, one could say, they also don't know what to do with it. That's also important too, you know? And it's like they don't know and they are paying. I mean, most people in this country, if Alix didn't exist, they're going to Google, they're calling an attorney. It's like TurboTax. My uncle was a CPA and he was like, you can't use TurboTax. You have to go to CPA. That's factually not true. You can go to TurboTax, right? And so I think like one way to think about Alix is we're trying to be the TurboTax of estate settlement.
I'm even thinking about like my own accounts and like they're just kind of mapped crazily in my head, but like nothing is like truly like written down or organized in one place. So it's like I can't imagine unwinding, even.
$84 trillion of the money that's going to be in this country is going to exchange hands from the silent and baby boomer generation over the next 10 years. 84 trillion people. That's just this country over the next decade and a half. Here's what's exciting to all the women out there who I know are fans of your show is that the majority of the money is entitled to go to women. We are going to see a feminization of wealth for a few reasons. One, women are outliving their spouses. Also, the eldest daughter in this country is oftentimes tasked with doing this work, which is also important and kind of incredibly unfair in some ways because, women in this country are also the caretakers, the caregivers to parents at the end of their life. So now we are doing this work lovingly in an exhaustive way, let's be honest. And guess what? When the person you love passes away, good luck. You have 900 hours and 18 more months of work ahead of you. So there's this invisible labor of women that's happening too. I think this idea, though, of feminization of wealth is important. There's a lot of conversation on the great wealth transfer of when the money comes, how will you invest it? Okay, that's all great, people. But if you don't know how to get the money in the first place earlier in the value chain, it's going to, I jokingly say it, but I'm kind of not, is like, you don't want mom's wedding ring going to the state of Alabama, right? Like, get what's yours, women. Your parents worked hard for you to leave this legacy behind. And I want to make sure at Alix that we're making that process simple so that you can sort of make that happen. And I think that's going to be so interesting when we see that. And I think that's part of the reason people haven't landed on this space. I think it took a woman's point of view to see it because women are doing the work.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated. I've been following all the stats on the great wealth transfer and really excited to see how that plays out. But like to your point, so important that like the money actually gets to the women in the first place. So incredibly valuable what you're building at Alix. So would love to just like go back a little bit. You had this like realization of like what you wanted to build with Alix, but like coming from the non-technical background and like not building a tech business in the past, what was like your first step of like, how do I get this thing live? Did you like go out and find a co-founder or what was like the first thing you did to get the business off the ground?
I think 2 things. I think number one, having the ability to identify everyday problems is super important, right? Like this wasn't a business out of the box handed to me by some venture studio. Like this was an everyday real problem. I wasn't iterating into finding a problem because I wanted to create a business. This is a real problem. Find a real problem, people. That's like half the game. Second, thank goodness I didn't follow the archetype. If I did, this would never be solved. I think the third thing is like, well, what is tech today? I mean, e-commerce was tech back in the day. And like, so that's also important. I also think it's important to be radically honest with what you're good at and what you're not. And I think good leaders, like for me, I know I'm doing well and I've hired well when everyone around me is way smarter at what they do than I am. Why wouldn't you hire someone way smarter at what they do than you are? I think that is the one thing I'm good at is finding people way smarter than me. That's important. I think females over index in being extremely comfortable in that because we are typically anyways used to being underestimated. So it's no big deal. We're like, so I think that's also really important. I knew that I wasn't a coder. Okay. But I wanted a co-founder who, finding a co-founder, by the way, Ruffin is its own podcast in it of itself. Okay. We gotta talk about that. But like, I was introduced to my co-founder, Hugh Tamasia, who was the former CTO of JP Morgan's entire consumer business and Acorns. And I was introduced to him by a board member at Acorns on the day that he was leaving. He'd already said he was going to leave. And they asked him, hey, what you going to do next? And I'm pretty sure he said something, I'm going to lay on the beach. And, they said, well, before you do that, you should meet with Alexandra. And so that's how Hugh and I met. And, I have to say, knock on wood, that has been a really great decision for us. We're great co-founders. We have, I think we have complementary skills. And I think like, even though we didn't know each other for a long time, we really sort of had great respect for each other and trust. And we're able to sort of find that working chemistry. And I think that's really important too for co-founders who didn't know each other from college or something like that. But it also gave me tremendous confidence. Hugh likes to say, when I met Alexandra, I asked her, she asked me, hey, can we build this? And, he says, yeah. And he likes to say, I asked Alexandra, can you sell it? And so I think that is like a great, sort of like, I think metaphor of how we sort of met and have run the business from in the early days.
What were your strategies for finding your co-founder? I know you said this could be a whole podcast, but maybe like one or two things. And then how did you know that he was the right person? And how did you kind of build that trust knowing that you didn't have a long-term relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think experience matters in this. Like, I just think we got to put that out there. There's not a playbook or a prescription that I can give that will help someone in their 20s because some of this is just learned, And what I mean by that is you have to know thyself. You don't know thyself. You're learning, I still don't. I meet people who know themselves even better. My point is, though, I still have 2 decades ahead of someone in their 20s to know thyself. So I think that's one. You have to be comfortable with yourself. No ego. I think it's like so important. Like I hear a lot of stories, I forget, but I was on LinkedIn the other day and I think someone had some sort of video about how one of the reasons companies don't work in the early seed stages is because of co-founder relationship. And so I think it's clever of you to sort of ask this question, but like there isn't a silver bullet other than if you're radically honest with yourself and you come from that place, you will make the right decision, right? So that's number one. Number two, look, like it is a bit like dating, you have to try things on. I think like ideating with someone, getting in the room with someone, all of those things, like you have to let it unfold. So I think that's important too. Like you don't need to have the answer the first day. And so you have to just let things unfold. And how do you let them unfold? You start playing. Building a business is like playing, and you should view it like that, right? When you're creating something from nothing, that only comes from play, right? So you have to see if you can jam with this person. You have to go through some things with this person and see how they're going to react. By the way, you're still not going to have it all figured out, but you got to go on instinct a little bit, right? So there's that. The other thing I did is when Hugh and I met in person, I took him on a hike, my favorite hike. And we went on a very long walk. And, I think things like that are really important too. Like you have to get to know the person and each other too. And so I think that those are some ways, but also you have to, it's not clear what a division of labor and a division of titles and a division of roles and responsibilities is day one. How can it be? You don't even know what the business is going to be day one. You sort of have an idea. So, you got to find someone that is uncomfortable in the uncertainty and we'll embrace it and enjoy it and know that one day we're going to look back and think these were the best days and so fun. I think that sort of attitude and that someone who's at the right point in their life is also important too. It's also okay. You don't want this person to have the same opinion as you, like on everything. How would that make any sense? So you got to be okay when you don't have the same opinion on something too. So I think it's like, it just takes time. Let it unfold. Trust your instincts.
Yeah, a little trial by fire.
Yeah, for sure.
And then beyond like finding your co-founder, how did you think about who you needed on the core team at Alix? And then, how do you think about being good at hiring? Because I'm sure, even before Alix, you've hired a bunch of folks in the past. So would love to hear kind of your takes on how you can be good at hiring.
When you think about someone who is working with you, I think two things. When you're building something from zero, like the people that you bring on your squad, they are building it with you. I am very careful to never say this is my company. This is our company, because it's factually true. That sounds subtle, but that's really important, not just in the language that I use, but what I truly believe, right? So I think people get excited if you're excited about the space. Think about the space that I'm building in right now. Okay. Like, how do you've never met someone as excited about estate settlement as me. And that's because I believe in the problem that we're solving. And I think the people that join our company believe it, see the vision, and know that we're making an impact on somebody's life. There's no way. Everybody wants meaning and purpose. I mean, we spend hours and hours and hours together. If you think about your day and you break it up, like, we are spending more time with the people we work with than anyone else. So you better believe that you are joining a culture that you appreciate, that you're, working on a mission you believe in. And I think all of that is intoxicating, and so I think just the same reason you started a company, like, make sure you bring that enthusiasm when you're meeting people to bring into your company, and to not forget that they are every day building the company. And I think remind them of that too. I have, believe it or not, when anything good happens, a bubble gum. And, I like to say Elon Musk might have a torch blower, but like, look, female founders, I have a bubble gun. I also do have a money gun for when that happens too. Okay.
So once you guys got Alix live, tell us more about how you went out and got your first customers, and what have kind of your growth strategies looked like? What has worked? What has maybe not worked so well?
Yeah, great question. So part one was building something. So when Hugh and I were raising money, it was just Hugh, me, and a deck. So I think that's really important. And so we really had to prove that we could build an estate settlement product at all. And so that was sort of the first part of Alix's inception, is, can we build a product at all? Once we had a product that we knew, we had run some beta customers through, and we had a lot of conviction, and we had customers that loved us, it gave us a lot more confidence that we could do this in a bit more ways. So, for us, our first customers came from channel partners that, we had used as a design partner. And so that was really helpful. But I do think that one of the lessons that I do think is worth talking about, I think when you're building something from nothing, sometimes you feel uncertain that the product you built is good enough. And I felt like my team was like, oh, is it good enough? Are we going to be able to help families? And I would always remind them, if Alix didn't exist, what would they do? Because literally, we're creating a new category here at Alix. So there isn't a playbook that we are ripping off. This is all original thought. So what exists today is eons better than what exists at Alix, is eons better than what existed before Alix. And I think making sure that your team is like bought into that. And guess what? Having live customers who tell us that make it so much better. I mean, we get text messages from our families saying, like, I feel like God put you in my path. Like, this is the most human moment anyone will ever go through in their life, and not insignificant. And so, like, having a team of people and a product that makes them feel so seen and cared for, and also like, we got this, is super important, And I think that's like, we're not like any other product. right? And I think that's why it took us a minute. Like your question of like, how'd you get your first customer? Like, I think that level of making sure we over index on making sure we could get it right before we found the first customer, because we knew we needed to get it right.
And to your point of fundraising, would love to just kind of understand, how was your fundraise? You raised $5.5 million from investors like Initialized Capital and Magnify Ventures. Where were you, like, with your product when you went out and fundraised? Were you truly, like you mentioned, just raising with a deck? And I guess what strategies would you share for other founders going out to raise their first round?
So I was raising money early, probably I started mid-February of 2023. Can't remember. We're like 14, 15 months old since we raised. Okay. And it really was Hugh and me and a deck, like really. And it is not a time where you would think someone should go out and fundraise. If you go back in time, the market dynamics were really bad. There were all these stories and posts on LinkedIn and all this stuff. And like, I probably should have listened to it, but I didn't. Thank goodness. I just kept the path. I will say a few things, which is the following. I think the number one thing you could do is be anesthetized to rejection. I think for me, it sounds silly, but like going door to door selling Girl Scout cookies. At some point before college started, I worked at a call center. When I was working in a PR firm, like we were still dialing for dollars. Like really being anesthetized to rejection is really important. So that's number one. Don't take anything personally, which is so easy to say. And by the way, people, I definitely hid under the covers and ate Ben and Jerry's many nights. Okay. So it's easy for me to say, but you got to get over it. Okay. Number two, story sell. I like to call things story selling. It is so important. I literally stopped sharing my screen and having a deck at some point, because think about this. Put yourself in the mind of the investor. They're rolling meeting into meeting into meeting into meeting. If you don't bring energy and a story behind what you're doing, they're zoning out. What do you do in a meeting? They're humans. They're doing the same thing. Okay. So you really need to capture their attention so that they're listening. That's important. The next thing though is you need to have a good business. I mean, that's like actually factually true. You need to have thought through some things. So I think, if you are going to raise a seed round truly on a deck, you need to have solved for a lot of things or prove that you will, right? So, we've done the research on this space. That's important. While we had not built the product yet, we definitely had like a whole product roadmap and what our plan was going to be and how this was going to work out. We also brought in a design partner, so we really had an idea of how we were going to distribute the product, or at least like start to test into how we were going to distribute the product, because you can imagine there are a lot of questions around, well, how are you going to meet families at scale in this business? So, also had a great co-founder that really helped. You could see that we had great chemistry and we were enthusiastic. Obviously, the questions around can you recruit felt like they were starting to get solved. So that was really helpful. So like have a good business, have some sort of ace in your card too, if you're not going to already have product and traction that like is really going to dazzle and, help them. Even if the investor loves you, they have to then do your job, which is sell it to their investment committee. Like don't forget that. So I think that's also really important. Real talk. I literally met 178 investors.
Wow.
178, in case people didn't hear that. Okay. Now let me tell you about this. I want to start out by saying I had multiple term sheet and I did feel like I was the belle of the ball at the end. But let me tell you about this. Okay. Which is twofold. I think there is, Ruffin, you might know this better. What is it, like 0.01% of, I think it's like 0.01% of women of color even get invested in fintech. And the numbers just generally are pretty terrible. Okay. So I'm going to plop that there. Let's everyone just like put that there. That's insanity. Okay. Now that we put that there, I would like to say that I would use the following strategy. The one thing that I learned, if I could go back in time, is an introduction from another founder is OP. Like that is like a weight of gold. So if you know a founder in a particular fund, like they're like funded, that person's on their cap table, take that, ask for that introduction. Okay, that's number one. Number two, by the way, I don't care what anyone says. Maybe there's like edge cases where you could go through this process just on a cold call. I am sure there are examples out there. Awesome for you. I'm saying though, like if you're going to plan this out properly, like you need introductions, right, wrong, whatever. That's just what it is. Okay. The next thing is I prioritize them that by funds that maybe by the way, you don't know everything about a fund, okay? That maybe I wasn't as excited about or I thought would be more chill or weren't my top tier. That's important. You need to get your pitch down. You only do that, but you need to sharpen your teeth on the first few. Watch their body language. See if they start to doze off to your story. By the way, if they're dozed off, they're not even listening. You should just stop talking. Like crack a joke, bring them back in. Fix what you're doing because otherwise everyone's just wasting their time. Okay. So that's also important. The other thing is in the process. So you know how I said these investors are rolling into calls, by the way, the same as you, rolling from call to call to call. Two things. Paul Mitchell, who is like, he also founded a tequila company, Jean-Paul DeJorio. Jean-Paul DeJorio started that shampoo company, right? I remember him saying once that he had every door-to-door sales he did, he had the same level of enthusiasm at number 72 at number one. That is your primary job. It doesn't matter what happened. By the way, can I just say, I literally was pitching an investor and I don't know if he forgot he was on camera, but he was sniffing his armpits and like picking his nose. So you have everything from that to like super amazing professional stuff. The reason why I say this is you have to shake it off and in the next one, bring that energy. That's your job. What can you control in this process is you. So make sure you control what you can. You can't control for very much in this process, right? The second thing is when, you're going call to call, an investor said to me, hey, because sometimes I will like shake it up and be like, hey, who'd you just meet with? What kind of company? And the guy says, well, you won't believe it. I just met with somebody who's creating a solution for divorces. They want to automate divorces. And that person said that the average relationship time you'll have with your investor is longer than the American marriage. And that really sat with me. So that was like actually a pivotal moment in my fundraising because you see a shift from me being like, I'm not trying to get you to like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not begging you for money here. Like, good for you. I'm trying to see if this is a good fit for me. And that's really important. It's not whether you like me, it's whether I like you. And that sort of subtle shift is like important in everyone here listening. Like this is why I said I went through 178, not because it's because I had multiple term sheets because of that shift. Then I started asking different questions. I started figuring out whether it was going to be important. For me, I knew what was going to be important. Literally, my investors on my cap table are on my speed dial. Like that is factually true. I knew I was going to be that kind of a founder for them where I was going to be chatty. I expect them to help sort of like build the business alongside me. There might be some founders who don't want to ever talk to an investor. Find that kind of investor who doesn't ever want to be called. That was not me. The second thing is I wanted someone who I sort of like was creating a team. If I had an investor that had X, I wanted an investor that had Y. So I really wanted to create a cap table that had different skill sets. So when the moment came, I knew who I could count on to maybe sort of open some doors for me. So that's really important too. You need to create FOMO. That's important. I can't overemphasize that enough. I don't know. Manufacture something, do something. Like you need to create FOMO. Otherwise people will be like, okay, let's get back to you in a month or two. No, we don't have a month or two. Okay. Like this train has left the station. Okay. So you need to be confident in yourself and what you're building. I also think that it is like dating, that process of all the things going on in there. Ruffin. Like, you are learning about them. That diligence process is there for you too.
All incredible advice. Thank you for sharing all those thoughtful things. I have so many follow-up questions. I don't even know where I want to go. But so when you were like thinking about the different skill sets in your investors, like what were some of those things that you were like looking for, really excited for to kind of combine into investors on your cap table?
Honestly, it was so many different things. You actually don't even know what you need till you start to meet the kinds of people that you need, right? For me, I wanted a type of person on my cap table that wasn't a branded fund. Why? Because that investor is going to work really hard. They are on the startup journey themselves with a new fund. So that type of energy was important for me to have someone on the cap table. It was also important for me to have someone on the cap table that could help open distribution. It was important for me to have someone on the cap table that was a great marketer, great storyteller. Okay, that was also interesting. It was also great for me to have someone on the cap table, frankly, that was branded, that had done this, that had a great reputation, that really was a traditional VC that could help you see the landmines that lay ahead as you build your business. So, like, really figuring out like what kind of players you need. You're only going to really figure that out as you meet and talk to people as well.
Any learning lessons from kind of negotiating term sheets? Like what can you or can you not negotiate?
The first term sheet I got, I said no to, even though I had no other term sheet in my hand. This is important. And remember all the articles, and, Carta has this great thing on LinkedIn where the guy gives you all this data. But back then, it was really not favorable to founders. Let me put it that way. And I still said no. You know why? Because when you are building a business, your co-founder, both of you are slogging it up all night, every night for the next decade or more. If you put yourself in a situation where you are not captains of your destiny from day one, what hope do you have? So you need to know what you're comfortable with and be comfortable and okay with stating that. Like, know your boundaries. And it's okay if you say no. Especially, let me put it this way, it felt okay. This is also unfair to say because it was just Hugh and me, right? And it was a deck. We didn't have a business yet where we had payroll and all these things. So, like, that is the caveat. But like, that is how our sort of thing went down. So when you have the chutzpah to say no to one, believe me, when the term sheets come in, if they're not feeling good, I definitely had the chutzpah to ask for what I wanted. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no. If they really want to invest in you, like, they're just going to say no. This is what it is what we're comfortable doing. That's the worst case. The best case, they'll be like, okay.
Exactly. You got nothing to lose. Amazing. Well, I could ask you like 100 more questions around this topic, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go to one of my favorite questions. Can you share a female founder, investor, or leader who inspires you and a little bit about why?
Sheila Marcello. She was the former founder and CEO of Care.com. And now she started, I think it's Ojai.ai. Okay. Let me tell you, she created a whole category we call caregiving now. Okay. Care economy. She started that. She took this company in a space. Can you imagine all the boys starting a company called Care.com? She took it public, people. Okay. She is a baller. After she did all of that, you're thinking, well, I mean, I'd just be in Portofino. She starts a whole new AI company with the same level of enthusiasm and rigor, and the level of love and care and time that she's willing to create in her already busy life to help other female founders is extraordinary. It's just extraordinary.
Amazing. I actually did not realize she launched a new company, so I'm definitely going to have to look up what she's doing. So I'm glad you highlighted that. Awesome. And then finally, where can people find you and where can people find Alix?
Go to meetalix.com. So it's meet and then Alix is spelled Alix. So come find us there for sure. Come LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. Send me a message. If you have any questions, I'm there. I'm also a scout for the Women's Fund at Alumni Ventures. So if you're building something, please share it with me. I'm interested.
And what does Alumni Ventures invest in?
Everything. They're the largest, most active venture fund on the planet.
Amazing. Well, so glad we finally got to meet and excited to share your story and all of your thoughtful lessons and advice from building Alix.
Thank you.